Good morning. My name is Moses Nelliman. I'm a proud descendant from the Miriam and Buddelike people from the Torres Strait. I welcome you today to the Townsville NAIDOC flag raising ceremony. This ceremony is a virtual event which has been conducted online as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. To say this year has been tumultuous is an understatement, as many of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities have been isolated, our families have been physically cut off from their loved ones, and as we deal with not meeting and gathering at certain events including NAIDOC, cultural events, and even sorry business, which has had restrictions around them. I welcome you today to celebrate our culture, our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, as we embark on the 2020 NAIDOC celebrations.
Wadamuli, everybody. Wadamuli means welcome, greetings and goodbye in my Birigubba language. And that's the language spoken by the Bindal people. And we are the traditional owners of the land in which we are meeting today for this virtual filming for NAIDOC, south of the Ross River in Townsville. I would like to acknowledge my elders, the past, the present and the future. Most importantly, I would like to honour my ancestors. They're the people who roamed this land and lived and made the environment what it is or what it was before colonisation. I would like to acknowledge all elders, all traditional owners who are viewing this welcome to country. I would like to thank the Townsville NAIDOC committee for giving me this opportunity to do this welcome on country. The most important thing this year is the theme for NAIDOC, and that is always was, always will be. However, the bottom part of that that's missing is always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Now we all know that mainland Australia is Aboriginal country. We all know that traditionally the Torres Strait Islanders are the landowners and traditional owners of the Torres Strait Islanders. And we are the First Nations people of this country. Every year we celebrate NAIDOC because it's a way of us bringing together all communities, regardless of your heritage, to celebrate our great history. We hope that in all schools, all universities, all government, non-government departments, that you too can celebrate with us in this great year of NAIDOC. Our NAIDOC celebration is every year. You're about to hear some of our great guest speakers that we've got lined up who will tell you a bit more about history. NAIDOC is the 1 week of the year that we First Nations people get to showcase our culture, our history. Unfortunately, it should be told 365 days of the year. We are hoping that schools, through education, more people will get to know the true history of this country. Universities should be teaching more in all subjects, not just history, social work, geography and whatever. NAIDOC is a week we celebrate the same as Australians like to celebrate, some Australians like to celebrate Australia Day. We are very proud of our culture. We are the oldest living culture in the world, older than the pyramids, the Egyptians, and we were built by our ancestors. We have animals in this place that fly around. Those animals are our ancestors. They remind us of what we had here in this country. So I just hope everybody can enjoy NAIDOC this year, the theme being, as I said, always was and always will be. This is a happy time for us. And like I said, the pride in our young people, the pride in our older people, but our generations are dying out now and we need everybody to come together. That word reconciliation is thrown around so much, but I don't think there's a real meaning to it until the true history is taught in this country. Thank you very much and enjoy the NAIDOC celebrations for 2020. Wadamuli. Thank you.
Algot Nabul Naibu. Wogarukuba, Gurumbura, Yamanan. Yindo Buldangare, Naya Naya, Nayari by Naya Milden. Hello and welcome. It's my pleasure on behalf of my Waggarukuba people, traditional custodians of Gurumbura, Townsville, and Yamanin, Magnetic Island, to welcome you for Townsville's 2020 NAIDOC celebration. Although we can't be together as a community this year due to the COVID circumstances, we can still be out with our families celebrating NAIDOC together. And tying in with this year's NAIDOC theme, always has been, always will be, what better way to be out on country, to continue to practice, teach and learn our cultural beliefs and customs, and to continue to carry that law for country. Everyone, happy NAIDOC, and Duldana, take care. Thank you.
Yagai, Ngaya Yinda Bidra Murray. My name is Glenn Thomas. I'm a Bidra Wakaman man, born and raised here in my adopted country, which is Waggarukuba country here in Townsville. Just have a little yarn to you about always was, always will be, this year's NAIDOC theme in 2020. Always was, always will be is about First Nations people of this country asserting sovereignty for all their lands and all the tribal groups here right across the country, over 500 nations. Always was, always will be, something you might have heard in one of our NAIDOC marches or protests when we're bringing awareness or highlighting issues like suicide, incarceration rates, deaths in custody. This has always been at the forefront of our political movements since the 1960s. So when we say always will, always was, when we say always was, always will be, we are speaking about our country, asserting our sovereign rights as the First Nations people. We're looking for self-determination to heal our country, to heal ourselves, to heal the land, the animals, and go back to ceremony and go back to healing. Thank you.
I got Nubble. Hello and how are you? We're the Waggarukuba Walkabouts dancers. The first dance we're going to perform for you today is Gubble. Gubble for our Waggarukuba people is our dreaming story and creation story, and tells the story of Gubble coming down the coast, creating the land, the sea, the animals and the people. The second dance we're going to perform for you here today is Nabel. And Nabel in our Waggarukuba language simply means welcome. This is our welcoming dance to welcome you here to country for our performance.
Hey,
last dance we're going to perform for you here is called Bidjarana. And Bidjarana is our farewell dance and our dance for our end of our Korbu, Maraga.
Good morning, my name is Leo Branarqui. I'm a proud Miriam from Mare Island in the Torres Strait. My tribal connections are Gyaram, Zagareb, Magaram, and my totems include Bezam, which is the shark, Gulbol, the whale, Bid, the dolphin, Tabor, the snake, Delmer, the Torres Strait Islander pigeon, and Serar, which is the tern. I'd like to acknowledge my Heavenly Father for prolonging my life and gives me his blessings, and to my Saviour Jesus Christ for his advocacy with the Father, for his perfect example. He's an example of truth and righteousness. He's my friend as well. To the traditional owners of country, I'd like to acknowledge the Bindal and Wulgarukaba people, First Nations people of this region. To my Miriam and Torres Strait Islander peoples, elders, both past, present and emerging. Gondwana land is unique here in Australia. There's nowhere else in the world where a nation of people has a monolith at its core, at its centre. Its heart beating proudly, encouraging our people to be strong and resilient and faithful. As the theme suggests, always was, always will be, First Nations people. We'll always be steeped in our laws and our customs. We'll always observe our cultural protocols since time immemorial. We practice our cultural traditions that have been handed down from our father to son, from mother to daughter, in our songs, our dances and our storytelling. Across this great nation of ours, our feet pound the earth calling for our gathering of our people to our stomping grounds. Our traditional dance rites from all over every First Nations groups represented in this country. Our voice echoes our cry for inalienable rights to be heard, to be recognised, not in words, but in deeds, and to be free from government policy of oppression and injustice. Encapsulated in our hearts is the undying spirit of our ancestors, long gone, but should never be forgotten. The legacy of our forefathers runs through our veins to remind us that we will always be First Nations people in our own right. We will raise our flags today as a mark of respect and to remind us of our very humble beginnings as a banner of hope and freedom to all of us. Let's stand together and be counted, and nobody can take away the fact that we will always be First Nations people and always be owners of this country. Furthermore, I'd like to add that our younger generation should take a leaf from the pages of our elders. They fight for their rights not only because someone said it was a good idea to do it, but it's our right as traditional people of this country, First Nations people, to become owners of our future, our destiny. And we need future leaders, and this is where our youth, our younger generation, need to stand up and be counted. I encourage all of you who come to celebrate NAIDOC in 2020, remember the theme that you will always be, always was, First Nations people, and you will always be First Nations people. Much love and God bless. Thank you.
Devedim Garile, meaning good morning everyone. First, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Bindal and Wulguru Kaba Nation. I also give acknowledgement and give honour to our wonderful elders present and those who have gone before us. My name is Emily Day and we are the Comet Torres Strait Islander Dance Group. We will entertain and give a taste of the Torres Straits through our traditional cultural performances. We also aim to promote, preserve and maintain our traditional culture. We are a local family group based here in Townsville, and as part of the flag-raising ceremony of the Townsville NAIDOC Week celebrations for 2020, the group will perform dances from the eastern regions of the Torres Strait, of Mare, Murray Island, Erub, Darnley Island, and Ugar, Stephen Island, which share the one language called Meriam-Mir. The eastern region of the Torres Strait is known as Khmer Meriam Nation.
My name is Adime Day, and I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and our elders both past and present. The theme for NAIDOC 2020 is always was and always will be. We, the Torres Strait Islander people, have ownership and occupied our lands and our islands in the Torres Straits from time immemorial. On June the 3rd, 1992, Grandad Edward Koiki Mabo and plaintiffs won the lands rights case and demolished Terra Nullius, meaning land belonging to no one, created by the Crown during the first settlement. We, the Comet Torres Strait Islander Art and Culture Group, acknowledge and rejoices in celebration of the 10-year struggle that our true Miriam warriors from Murray Island, the late Grandad Koiki Mabo, Papa James Rice, Lugas Dave Pussy, Grandad Henry Kabiri, Lugas Sam Pussy, and Grandma Selu Asali, what they endured to make their vision of the future a reality, and what always was and always will be, Keribaged, meaning our land.
Our first performance this morning is a dance about the first Gulf cruise liner STV entering the Torres Strait Islands, being pushed by a 6-head Rolls-Royce tugboat at dusk. And as the cruise liner's lights turn on, the islanders describe it as lightning surrounding the ship. Awaswal. Our last performance this morning is called Zangalupa, which tells a love story about a light-skinned girl named Zelberokep telling her boyfriend Bezam how she will be leaving him on the deep blue sea. As you'll hear, there is a bit of English language in this song. Aweswal.
I hope you will enjoy our performances, as we, the Comet Torres Strait Islander Art and Culture Group, are grateful for being a local community artist group of our city, Townsville. Love and show admiration to these lands of our spectacular Australia as your own self. Then you can truly care and respect all things. Taking notice of something not man-made, a mountain, a tree, a star, or just the wave of the ocean, there will come to you a great wisdom. Patience and peace, assuring that you are not alone on these lands. For these lands will always have a song to sing for those who listen. Aweso and Kaimeso, meaning in both Miriamir and Kalalagauya and Kalakauya languages of the Torres Straits. A big thank you, and hope your NAIDOC celebrations continue yearly, embracing and acknowledging the two Indigenous cultures, and may enjoy the rest of your NAIDOC festivities. Stay blessed.
Wadamuli all. Wadamuli means welcome and greetings in my Birugaba language. My name is, I'm an elder, Professor Graceland Smallwood. I'm here as one of the Bindal Birugaba elders, and I'd like to pay my respects to our Creator, the traditional owners of this beautiful country here at James Cook University, and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. But I'd sincerely like to thank the wonderful NAIDOC committee that we have had for the last 5 to 10 years, who are doing a magnificent job under extreme pressure. And the fact that I'm speaking today on the theme of always was and always will be, it's a great honour. I've had the privilege of being brought up in a very strong cultural and political family and community, both on the Smallwood and Stanley side, and also my grandmother's South Sea connections and all of my Torres Strait Islander in-laws. So I've had the whole holistic approach. NAIDOC theme, it's a wonderful theme because it's timely because of the poor race relations in our country. But we want all Australians to celebrate NAIDOC together as one, with the horrific conflicts that have happened through the impact of colonisation. And so in the 1920s, many activists around Australia, but most importantly in New South Wales and Sydney and Botany Bay, they got together and protested and said they wanted a day of mourning to show that First Nations peoples were suffering terribly. And so they decided to do that the day before the 26th of January 1788, which most of the written history in Australia has been written, where all this evidence-based research, including our stories from our elders, passed down, shows that we've been here, First Nations peoples, over 65,000 years. And we are the oldest surviving living culture in the world, outdating the Egyptians, the oldest cultures in the world they thought were not First Nations Australians, but there's now scientific proof that we have been. And so what happened with this day of mourning, elders said, we're slaves in our own land, we want our own day of mourning, the day before the 26th of January, which is celebrated for Australia Day. And then the protest continued. There was then, after that, about 1,000 people, including non-Indigenous Australians, joined the activists down south, and people came from all over Australia, still calling and protesting for a day of mourning and calling for a day of celebration for First Nations Australians surviving basically the impact of colonisation, but showing the world of our wonderful culture. And to this day, we haven't had a public holiday for NAIDOC, but we're still asking the government for this holiday and for white Australians to join us hand in hand as one with truth and reconciliation. It wasn't until the Department of Aboriginal Affairs in the 70s, when Cormac Perkins headed up the department, and through his leadership and a lot of political activism from both black and white Australians, that a lot of things came into power, including the Whitlam government when he was Prime Minister. We had a lot of black services that were established and funded, briefly funded compared to non-Indigenous Australians, but Cormac Perkins really paved the way as the head diplomat of the department. NAIDOC then started to take on what the elders, the freedom fighters had left behind from the day of mourning, and they called it then in the 70s NAIDOC, the National Aboriginal and Islander Day Observers Committee. And every year there's been a theme, and every place we can think of has an elected NAIDOC committee. They're usually non-funded, which is why we've got the deadliest committee in Townsville. It's like they operate on 2 fishes and 3 loaves of bread, and they seem to go around the community. So my job is to keynote on this very important occasion. And it was in the late 60s that a brilliant lawyer called Paul Coe, one of the biggest activists down in that area, he took the Australian government on for sovereignty, and the court was called Coe versus the Crown. But because of so much poor race relations around the country, he lost that case, but he set the scene for us fighting for our sovereign rights, which First Nations peoples have never seceded. And then, having the privilege of being at James Cook and doing a couple of degrees here, my good teaching was out here for not only my family, but Uncle Koiki Mabo, the late Koiki Mabo, and 6 plaintiffs took the federal government on, and what we now know as the Mabo legislation, where they proved real sovereign rights to their land in the Mir Islands. And there has been not one First Nations family that hasn't been affected through the impact of colonisation, loss of land, loss of our children, loss of a whole lot of things. And he set a precedent with his plaintiffs to get real sovereign rights. And then the mining companies, so many people which were very conservative, were very concerned that the highest court in the land had given a group of Indigenous peoples or Torres Strait Islanders sovereign rights to their land, because the country was taken over through terra nullius, which was unoccupied land. So it was proved in the federal court that all First Nations peoples never seceded the country, so it was illegally taken from us. And so what happened then, the then Prime Minister of the day called legislation and watered down the Mabo sovereign legislation, which weakened the Sovereignty Act, and then it became very weak and caused a lot of controversy amongst all First Nations peoples, because we had to prove where we come from, whereas under the Mabo legislation you didn't have to prove your genealogy, as what the First Nations very weak Native Title Act is doing to us today. So these NAIDOC committees, really endorsed by the Department of Aboriginal Affairs, every year the National Committee has a theme. It was serving your country, and I was nominated as the National First Nations Person of the Year, and I was so surprised that I was awarded that, but very proud for being an activist all those years, and pushing not just for real land rights, but for our sovereignty back and closing the gap. This year it's always was and always will be, and the silent partner of that is Aboriginal land. And because we're the oldest culture in the world, we were the first scientists, we were the first everything. And for us to be able to survive a terrible Holocaust called the colonising legislations, we have survived against all odds. And the theme always was and always will be Aboriginal land, has been around probably in the early 20s, and we've never given up. Even though we're 3% of the population, we are now receiving quite a number of support from non-Indigenous peoples who have now learnt the truth through a lot of research, and they're absolutely horrified of the impact of colonisation and the true history of this country. But what NAIDOC is about is bringing all of us together. We would like non-Indigenous and all of our mob to start signing a petition, as we do when we want something to happen, to have a holiday for Australia. Even if people don't believe in what First Nations peoples are about, they like to take a holiday, but it would give them time to reflect and look at our history, because it was never mandatory in the Western curriculum. And so what's happening, I'm optimistic that things are changing slowly. We need demonstrations. I don't know how many demonstrations I've been in, right up to the Black Lives Matter, because we had the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody. There's been more deaths in custody since that report. There's been more of our children removed since the Bringing Them Home report. The gap is widening since the National Aboriginal Health Strategy. And if those recommendations had been implemented, we wouldn't be talking about closing the gap. So NAIDOC is about all positive energies, all of us coming together, pressuring all the governments. Doesn't matter which government's in power, the people are the power. And we want white Australians to join us in harmony and reconciliation with the truth. We want you to help us, because I've been doing this for 50 years, I've now retired, be 70 next year, and I won't ever give up, that we want a national holiday like Australia Day. We don't want to celebrate the 26th of January 1788, because that was the day our land was stolen, many of our people were murdered, many of our children were stolen, and a lot of our law and culture was removed from us. And we were put, not we, our grandparents and parents were put on missions and curfews. And you've got history repeating itself, where a government wants curfews on all the children from 14 to 17 in Townsville and Cairns. There's only 30% of the children committing crimes, so that means the other 70% of children that aren't committing crimes have to suffer through a blanket legislation, which is why I totally don't support curfews. I don't support prohibition, because none of that has ever worked anywhere in the world. And until race relations is 100% positive on both sides, we will continue to have legislations that are disempowering us, that are going back to the old regime of Under the Protection Act that removed a lot of our people. So NAIDOC is about celebration, bringing harmony to us, talking to the old people and the spirits, because I want my grandchildren and non-Indigenous Australian grandchildren to live in harmony with affirmative action strategies in Parliament and all over this country, and respecting each other's law and culture. And I believe that Australia will be a better Australia once they understand why we don't want to celebrate the 26th of January. We certainly want Australia Day to be on another day, and maybe that could be the day through NAIDOC where we have a national holiday where black and white Australians come together. And as I said, the theme is wonderful this year, always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. Aboriginal Australians are the First Nations peoples that own the entire country, which was taken from us. We want some of that back. We're not greedy, we'd like to share that with you. Our Torres Strait and South Sea Islander people are the second group that from the Torres Straits and from the Kanaka blackbirding, all of our one mob. We want us all to come together to celebrate this wonderful occasion of NAIDOC next week. And again, I thank our elders. I thank my big sister Dorothy, who's been my guiding light with all the elders. The wonderful committee, who are all very culturally appropriate. Sue Gare and her social work department, the Henry Reynolds of the World and No Loose. Wonderful non-Indigenous peoples that seen the future of reconciliation many years ago before we started really hard pressing and having Wadamuli Creek, having Gundaloo Creek, and also having a statue of Uncle Koiki Mabo, who those Torres Strait group paved the way. But let's not forget that Paul Coe, the heavy Aboriginal lawyer, set the scene in the 60s. His court case was failed, and then this was the second lot of activism, and the whole world was watching about First Nations Australians because we were hidden, we were a secret country. And as John Pill just said, we were a secret country, but the whole world was watching, especially when Kathy Freeman ran in the Olympics and ran with the Aboriginal flag and the Australian flag, and people thought it was the German flag. And that's when, through a lot of activism and freedom fighters, the whole world found out that we're First Nations peoples in this country and that we were colonised in exactly the same way as the First Nations peoples of Canada and America. Once again, I'd like to thank the committee, James Cook University and our elders for this year's speaking at Always Was and Always Will Be Aboriginal Land. Wadamuli.
Thank you for joining us for the NAIDOC 2020 virtual flag raising ceremony. Due to COVID restrictions, Townsville will not host a NAIDOC march this year or a Deadly Day Out, but we do invite you to come onto our Facebook page or the website www.townsvillenaidoc.com.au to find out more information about the Elders Luncheon being held at the Ville Casino on the 11th of December and also the NAIDOC Christmas Dinner being held on the 18th of December at the Ville Casino Resort. Thank you and goodbye.